And thank you all for coming out on this gorgeous August afternoon. It's one of those days when summer appears and we'd all love to be out doing some summery kind of thing. In any case, I think we have a very good program for you today. First of all, a couple of things about the future and about the immediate future is if you can take your cell phone and turn it back so that it's only on vibrate and not getting to us in terms of ringing when the program is going. That would be really great. Nice to be back at Northwood Hall, where we have our nice buffet and great staff working with us. We had a great meeting with the governor last month, and we have some programs coming up in September and October that I think you'll like too. On September 28th, the two finalists for the county executive race, State Senator Doug Erickson from the 42nd District and Jack Laus, who happens to be here today, the former mayor of Linden and head for many years of Laus Trust. So that will be at our regular time on September 28th, regular place right here. And October 26th, we don't have everything totally worked out, but we hope to have a second hotly contested race, the mayor of Bellingham, here for us. We started out the season politically in May with mayoral candidates, and we'll come back to close it out because in November we have the latest possible date for elections, so we have almost the whole time that people will have their ballots by the time we have our October meeting. So that'll be October 26th, again, right here. I'd also like to thank our business members for continuing support of City Club. The sponsoring members, Zender Thurston Law Firm and Totally Chocolate. We also have business partners, the Carnelian Corporation, Highland Healthcare, Opportunity Council, and Educational Systemics. Today we're very pleased to have as a guest Bruce Shepard, who next week will begin his 4th year as president of Western Washington University. Bruce, a native of California, earned his bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in political science from the University of California, Riverside. He spent 23 years at Oregon State University, where he became a tenured faculty member in political science department and served in a variety of administrative roles. Among them, State Government Liaison Specialist, Assistant Vice President for Undergraduate Studies, and Director of Undergraduate Academic Programs. In 1995, Bruce became Provost of Eastern Oregon University, where he was also a professor of political science. From November of 2001 until June of 2008, he served as Chancellor of the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay. In April 2008, Western's Board of Trustees named Bruce the 13th president of Western. So as Bruce ends his 3rd year as Western's president, we've asked him to come with us today to speak about the university's response to significant cutbacks, and that's probably a big understatement, significant cutbacks in state funding. Its restructuring and retooling to meet current and future needs, and its role in relation to the Bellingham-Whatcom County community and beyond. Please join me in giving Bruce Shepard a warm City Club welcome.
Thank you much, Don, for that introduction. It's just a delight, a pleasure to be here with you all. I've been looking forward to it a lot. I know the leadership you provide for our community, and that's a subject we may want to delve into as we get into questions and answers, too. I stand here with you at some risk because, you know, you give a microphone to a professor and you don't know how long it's going to go on. I really do want to hear your questions. Usually in the audience is my wife, Cindy, and I can always count on her. I look at her, and I've seen her actually go like this at times because, but I do want to leave much time to address the issues of importance to you. Don, I appreciate your addressing me as Bruce. That's really what I prefer to be called. It's been that case all the time, wherever I've been. At Green Bay, the students got it first, and it was It was kind of fun because whenever I'd walk into a basketball game, the student cheering section would all start chanting, "Brew, brew, brew," which is really does great things for your ego until somebody, maybe it was Steve Swan, pointed out to me, "Bruce, what they're really telling you is what they want you to serve at the student union." So it is a delight. I believe leadership is about listening and asking questions, not giving answers. In fact, I think that we ought to be suspicious of those who come in and say they have the answers. It's always been my experience that groups are far more creative and innovative in what they're able to come up with than single individuals, and anything that I might claim credit for in my career, I likely might maybe facilitated along the way, but somebody else far brighter than I or more connected to the problem than I had the original idea, and our job was to bring that to the surface. And I want to do that this evening because I really practiced that. When I first got here, I said, I'll meet with every employee at the university. That was 2,200 people, and it took 4 months and 100 meetings, and I about died, I think, doing it. But boy, they were energizing, and I heard so much from them, these original meetings. And then we really needed to figure out the direction Western needed to be going in the future. It was a very solid university, outstanding university, but we saw challenging times coming ahead. So we held 100 conversations, largely some in Bellingham, all over the state, some on the other side of the continent, just to talk about Western and where it should be going. I'll be referring back to some of the things we learned in those conversations and how they've shaped where Western is going. But one of the things they said was, don't stop with 100 conversations. Keep that conversation going. And I see this meeting as, again, one of those opportunities for you to help challenge, hold our feet to the fire, ask questions. I think that's the role of a leader. Yes, we ask questions, but not any questions. Questions that take people outside of their zones of comfort, because the world's changing rapidly. And I don't know about you, I still like it the way it is now, and don't change easily. So how do we change easily? It's by constantly challenging ourselves with things that take us outside our zones of comfort. And I hope you'll do the same as we enter into areas of particular questions. I have a very simple thesis for the remarks, and I'll come back to it several times. And it's this, that a community's wealth, a state's wealth, a nation's wealth, social, cultural, economic, political, is best measured by the developed talent of its people, the fully developed talent of all of its people. And I could give you statistics and talk about connections in a dry and academic way. But I was told by Don, do talk about the budget crisis and how that's affecting Western and how we're responding to it in its relationship to Bellingham and our relationship with Bellingham. But I was also told, don't give your usual stump speech. And so I'm trying not to do that and just brag about Western. President can't resist, though. We did put this on the table, a number of things that we think are significant that may not be known about Western. Did that for another reason. One of the things we learned in the 100 conversations is that it seemed like Western was its excellence, what it's about, its distinctiveness, its world-class status in a lot of areas, its national ranking in all sorts of different ways, was better understood sort of the further away from Bellingham we got. And so that was sort of a responsibility of ours to do a far better job. There's sort of a natural, a prophet in their own hometown sort of thing may not fully understand what Western's known for. And so that's one reason I wanted to provide that fact sheet also for you as an audience. But as to that thesis, a nation's, a state's, a community's wealth is best measured by the developed talent of all of its people. Instead of the statistics, the dry academic stuff, I want to tell you about my dad. Because the other message I got is make this personal. Let us get to know you and your views and your thoughts and your background also. Our family are agricultural workers. We worked on the land that other people owned. And my granddad jumped a freight at the age of 14 where the family roots are in Missouri and ended up in Fresno, California, where he went to work. And then his son, my dad, at the age of 20 was moving irrigation water from one furrow to another with a shovel. Dawned on him that he'd be doing that the rest of his life. So he went down to Berkeley, pumped gas at a service station. For those of you old enough to remember things called service stations, and the idea of somebody else pumping your gas, and earned the $17 in fees and tuition he needed a semester to go to Cal Berkeley. Interrupted by service in the Second World War, went on to get his PhD, had a successful career. His two sons both went to college, got PhDs, have had successful careers. And in that, I think it captivates this idea of higher education as a transforming force in our society, how it transforms certainly individuals, but through that means communities, states, nations. That's what higher ed is able to do. In fact, the social scientist in me, as we look critically at government policies and opportunities, what are the things governments do that really provide opportunities for upward social mobility, for really transforming individuals and families? And there are lots of things we do to deal with the symptoms, but how about actually making those fundamental transformations? And one is the U.S. military. There's no question about that. It is a transformative force in our society for upward social mobility. Whatever else you may think about that. The other is higher education, and principally public higher education. And states don't have armies and air forces, but they do have higher education systems. And so I think of public higher education as the principal lever a state has to make a difference, to make brighter futures for the people who are the state. I'm going to set the context of what we're operating in here as we try to think about Western's future. There has been a precipitous decline in state support for public higher education. About 12, 14 years ago, the state covered 72% of the costs of instruction. It had been slowly creeping down. When I got here 3 years ago now, it was 60% of the cost of instruction. The academic year coming up, it will be 30% of the cost of instruction. Cut in half. I hope I'm not the causal factor there, but it has been precipitous. I do want you to know that our costs have remained constant over that period of time. In fact, the cost per student has declined in terms of what it costs to educate a student at Western. We can show you the graphs and the data. That's even as we have our students are demanding the more and more expensive programs. They're the science and technology-based curricula where they're moving. We're doing more and more to address the very legitimate concerns in making sure that we're retaining and graduating students at, for Western, national, very, very high rates by any national standard, and diversifying the campus successfully as well. So we've kept costs constant, and I know those of you who have written tuition checks recently may wonder what in the world I'm talking about. Of course, tuition's gone up. That's the price. The price has gone up, but it's because of the reduction in state support I've talked about, and it hasn't been a dollar-to-dollar backfill. We've been cutting tens of millions of dollars out of our budget, even with that those tuition increases. I'm not here to whine about that. I'm here to talk about the sorts of choices that we're going to make, as we're making as a result of that. The state does face hard choices. We had the Ralph Monroe Policy Institute on our campus this summer, and Hans Dunshee was there, and he said, as Hans is always very direct, and after I had given my thing on the need to support higher education, he said, I know higher ed is part of the solution, but if we cut you guys, classrooms are going to be more crowded, tuition will go up, and fewer kids will get to college or be able to make it through. All true. If we cut human services like the Disability Lifeline, people will die. Now that's a very serious and tough choice that our legislators are grappling with. By the way, our state is somewhat unusual in that the higher ed numbers I just gave in terms of cut, we lead the nation in the cuts to higher ed. We did 2 years ago, we did this for the next biennium. Other states are not cutting higher ed like Washington has. Other states, where is our economy? Actually, our economy isn't that bad compared to the rest of the states. We're in the top third. Other 2/3 of the states are doing worse than we are in terms of, so where is the problem? Well, it goes back to public finance and our approaches to revenue and stuff that I'd be happy to talk about in discussion, but that's, state spending has been absolutely flat on a percentage of gross domestic product basis. So those are issues that I'd love to talk about if we get to questions. So, but the tough choices are there. And you know, as we look at it, and as certainly the state wants to be globally competitive, it has high aspirations for doing so. And as I think about it, how does a state support its admirable commissions, its admirable commitments to social justice, to equality, as Hans cared so much about, as we all do, protecting the most vulnerable amongst us? How does it continue to support and afford those sorts of things? The rest of the world knows what the answer is. That higher education is not an alternative way to spend your money. It's not a competitor for spending your money. It is the solution to those longer-term needs for society to flourish. If you look at the data country by country, and it's particularly true for the Brazils and the Chinas and the Indias, and you look at participation in higher education by age, you see a declining pyramid. The younger groups are being much better educated than their parents and their parents' parents. That's the pattern you see in country after country after country. And that means as we go ahead in the decades, the societies are becoming better educated, better able to compete in a global economy, a knowledge-based economy, in a flattened world. There's one outlier. It's the United States. The data now show that the current generation will be less well prepared in terms of higher education than the generation preceding it. We're going in exactly the opposite direction from the rest of the world. And we talk about that from a worldly perspective. Where does Washington rank in the nation? We've got a nation that's sort of going in the wrong direction compared to the rest of the world here. Where's Washington? Washington ranks among the 50 states 48th out of 50 in the percentage of its population involved in public baccalaureate education. It's not just that we underfund higher ed on a per student basis compared to the rest of the nation. We do. We fund a very small pipeline, underfund a very, in fact, I call it a pipette, not a pipeline. That's what we're funding here in terms of higher ed and brighter futures for our state. Yet we're a well-educated state. How do you explain this? People like to live in Washington, and so we import our developed talent. That's what we're doing as a state. The data are very, very clear on that. There are a couple of problems with that. One, it's not something we can bet the future on because those data are softening. There are other places that people like to go as well, and other states that are investing in developing their talents. It also sort of means that this is, I suppose, a rather cold place to put it, way to put it, but I can't avoid it. What we're sort of saying as a matter of public policy is that the amount of education that's okay for our sons and daughters is just enough to go to work for those who come from out of state to get the better paying jobs. And so there's sort of a social justice issue there to be thinking about as well as just how bright a future we can have as a state. Those are all part of the context for then how does Western respond to these particular challenges. The first is to be really clear about what our strengths are and what direction we want to go. We spent a fair amount of time, when I did those 100 conversations around the campus, everybody agreed we're a premier institution, and if we went off into the future just patting ourselves on the back and saying, aren't we wonderful? And then when crunch time came, realized we all have different ideas of just what we're wonderful for, the whole thing had fallen apart. So we really had to spend some time nailing down what was distinctively Western. So we used professionals to get an outside, credible view of what do our alumni say, our incoming students, their parents, legislators, supporters in the financial support, philanthropic supporters, people in the Bellingham community. What is it that's distinctively Western? And we can now answer that question very clearly, and it will come as no surprise. We offer premier undergraduate programs that put students in the classroom with top-notch faculty in hands-on, often applied experiences, problem solving, and this is the key phrase, and towards leading a purposed life. That's what our alumni are about. That's what our students are about. It imbues our students and what they want to do. And I'll return to that because it also imbues Bellingham. It's just really struck Cindy and me as well. I bet if I had you tell me, what were the conversations around your tables here at lunch today? It was about making a difference somehow here. That was the case as we were talking at our table about the subjects that were brought up here. That's really what motivates us all. So it's another nice connection between the university and the directions we believe in. The other thing we had to be clear about is our direction. We had a great strategic plan. I've developed these for universities. It was 10 pages, great pictures, and everything anybody ever wanted to do, I think, for the university is how I characterize it sometimes. In tough times, it didn't give us the priorities. And so we had to look long and hard at what was something that we could boil down to a single page and really be clear in our direction. We also had a vision, one that was very attractive to me, one that helped, one reason why I'm here, it was to go from being the best university of our type in the Northwest to being the best university of our type in the nation. What we heard in the 100 conversations is, that's all about you. You need to be about the differences you make. And so we had to take those things to heart. A year ago, I set that challenge for our faculty and staff. It's got to be bottom up. I want a strategic plan. I want one goal, 3 objectives, and it's got to be about the difference we make, not about us. And I want it by December. Well, that's lightning speed at a university. We like to study things for 18 months and that sort of thing. We have fabulous faculty and staff. They took that to heart. They delivered it. We had it, our trustees adopted it in December. And we needed it then because we knew we were going into budget cutting. And we had to know. We had to have that direction and that understanding. And that understanding of what Western's about, I call our promise to our students. That's what we will protect and deliver on. The strategic plan basically says what we're going to do is take the areas where we're strong. We're not going to try to be everything to everybody, but the areas where we're strong and use those to address the critical needs of the state. So it's, that I call our promise to the state. So that was all groundwork that was done as we went into these particular times. But you can see, given that context of the state financing I painted, here we now have a promise to our students. It's really to protect the quality of their education and their engagement in the world around them. We have a commitment to the state to use our areas of strength to address the areas of state need. We're already recognized, the 6 publics in Washington, as the most efficient public institutions in the state, excuse me, in the country. We rank #1 there in cost per degree and things like that. We are recognized for our cost containment. You see that on that sheet. Recently, is one of the most efficient, Western is one of the most efficient universities in the country. And yet we have these promises to deliver on and a very bleak fiscal picture. We last fall began to sketch the options. What do you do about that? We looked at, we looked at options like, let's become an elite serving university. We're in such demand and such quality that we could just let tuition go way up. We could run on the tuition we could collect. We would serve the sons and daughters of the affluent in this state and out of state, and would do more out of state recruiting. That was one option in this situation where state support's dropping from 60% to 30%. We could become basically a smaller liberal arts college. You have to cut the more expensive programs. That's the only way you can make it work. And we would cut back to the smaller core, less expensive programs. That we could balance the budget on tuition basically. Or we could become another mediocre regional university. And that, frankly, is the direction we would end up at if all we did was temporize, if we didn't make some fundamental choices and decisions. Universities around the country are struggling with this issue. We decided none of those options are acceptable because they all three break either that promise to our students about what the Western education is about, or our promise to the state, our strategic direction. Either both fail on one or both of those grounds. So what do you do in that particular situation? We came up with an approach that involves restructuring basically everything we do, guided by those 2 promises I mentioned. And I'll spare you all the nitty-gritty of it, but it involves looking at every course requirement, looking at every business practice and everything we can to squeeze out more savings, more efficiency, to make sure what we're protecting are the highest priorities for our university. And so far, will this work? It's a gamble. The options are not, the options I outlined are just totally unacceptable, so it's got to work. But because of the creativity of so many, we not only have come through these budget times with cuts the likes of which I have never come close to seeing in my career, I think as strong as ever, as much as in demand as ever, but also with the programs the students seek us out for still very much intact and strong. But we have done more than that. We've cut even further. We're putting more money into what we identified as major challenges. We were having bottlenecks in growing areas, for example, in the science-based areas. We're putting millions of dollars back into that to expand those bottlenecks. Access to quality. Not every people in this room will understand it. Not everybody in the state will. For 2 years, we have not hired any tenured track faculty. You cannot sustain. They're our core access. We're a talent-based enterprise. Do that for a couple more years, we're straight at that tenure. We're straight at that mediocre regional university where everybody's taught by adjuncts, and take 6 years to graduate and all that sort of stuff. We are now reinvesting in hiring tenure track faculty. We've freed up the resources to begin that process. I could go down the list. So it's more than just figuring out where to cut, but figuring out where to cut so we can then guarantee on that promise to our students, on that promise to the state. So that's how we're handling these things. I think it's also important to know that key to all of what we do in this day and age are partnerships. In the question session, I'd be happy to get into the many we have. We work closely with Bellingham Tech, with Whatcom on a variety of things, but also with all the other 2 years in our region on a lot of exciting projects. We're very much involved with partners in the enterprise initiatives down on the waterfront. We have partners in economic development. We're working with the city and the county on that, and through the critical junctures with the hospital, on down the list of all sorts of things. But then in this day and age is how we get more done, is by realizing, again, it's not about us. It's about the differences together we can make, and so it's the partnerships. I'm going to end with just a couple of examples of why I think this is important to Bellingham. There are a lot more, but this will give you a flavor for why I think they're important. And I hope you will be telling me, as I shut up, what the university needs to be doing to be even more relevant, more important in Bellingham and in Whatcom County. Presidents would love to talk about the economic impacts of their institutions, and I could sure give you the data. You look at our payroll and what our students spend, and it's somewhere between $750 and $500 million a year we pump into the local economy. But I think we overemphasize the economic. We love the statistic that a college grad compared to a high school grad over the course of a lifetime now has earnings in excess of $1 million more. I think that's all the wrong things to emphasize. We don't emphasize what a college education does to the quality of a citizen's contributions or their participation in civic organizations or their physical health for that matter. There's all good data on those sorts of things that it's important to emphasize. And so rather than the economic impact, I want to talk about the impact of what our students and faculty and staff contribute to the community. Over 1 million hours of volunteer service. I don't know how many directors of social service agencies I've talked to in our area who have just said we couldn't survive without the Bellingham, without the Western students there to make these things. And we couldn't survive without you providing with those opportunities, because this is the nature of our students. They want to do this thing and they want that kind of field experience and learning. We were recently recognized for that. There's something I didn't even know about. We didn't seek this thing out. There's some sort of honor roll for community service universities that are particularly distinctive, and we were placed on that honor roll by the White House. And there was one other university in our state that got similar recognition. That was Gonzaga. If you know Gonzaga, and I've had the good fortune to spend time there, it has a wonderful Jesuit tradition with a great commitment for all of the faculty, staff, and students to reach out and serve that great tradition. So we think it's pretty good company for them to be, and to be in Western's company there. And we also think it's great to have a fine institution like Gonzaga, because not everybody gets to go to Western. But we've talked about that pipette pipeline problem. The truth is, the students are not out there prepared to succeed in the numbers we have, our own sons and daughters. The populations that are growing most rapidly don't have K-12, don't have higher education on their radar. If mom and dad haven't gone to college, it's unlikely to be there. So we have one program that works with every school district in Whatcom County and a number in Skagit that is designed to raise aspirations, and we can document its effectiveness now. Could go into more detail on it, but it's also, we have 1,000 of our Western students a year putting in tens of thousands of hours into schools, and we have superintendents in the toughest schools standing up and testifying in Olympia or before our board saying, this is the one program in all their career that they've seen actually make a difference in the performance of students who are destined to be problems and are now pointing towards college. That's, I think, a way we connect with Bellingham. That's just one small program within a college of education that's known across the state for its excellence. Most universities don't brag about their colleges of education. I never have till I got to Western. Woodring is the kind of college where when I walk into the superintendent's office, they always tell me, I almost write the line, Bruce, if I've got a job opening and there's a stack of resumes on my desk, the ones that say Woodring go to the top of that stack. That's the reputation we're known for there in terms of what it does. And that's important to them, to our whole state, of course. You've heard about our Vehicle Research Institute and the Automotive X Prize, and that was a lot of fun. It was fun to leave Cornell and MIT in the dust in a worldwide competition of 120 with $1 billion companies, and I can tell you lots of stories about that. But when Eric Linhart, the faculty member behind all that, I was at a function where he was asked, you know, well, what's the next car? That's not what it's about. What's next for them? They're working very hard on a Bremerton-based Kitsap Transit project to build lightweight hybrid buses to double their fuel efficiency. They're working with our local dairy operations to build digesters in site that take a cow byproduct, I guess I'll put it that way, and turn it into enough methane to be the fuel equivalent to power every year into the future 100,000 cars. Talk about making something from nothing. That's pretty impressive. The last thing I'll mention is I was touring a local firm here recently, Pro CNC, and it was happened to be started by 6 people who were graduates of the Vehicle Research Institute. They picked the VRI because it's the only place in the country they could find where they get hands-on, actually doing engineering, not theory and working on computers and stuff, actually building things. And of course, what do you do when you're 21 and graduate from college? You want to build sports cars, so that's what they intended to do. They wanted to live in Bellingham. They love Bellingham. The main complaint I get from our students is, we love this place, we want to stay. There aren't the jobs. Help there be the jobs here for people to stay in this wonderful area. So they started this firm. They do high-tech machining. I always think of a guy or a woman at a metal lathe, you know, working on with metal shards. These are all machines. There's not a human being around, and they're robots. The human beings are all in the back room, often Western graduates, programming these things and doing the CAD programs and stuff, making parts for the airlines and Boeing and what have you. 51 very well-paying jobs in our community from these entrepreneurs. And by the way, when it comes to the pipeline, it's not just about fairness for our sons and daughters. Here are people who are enriching our community and providing this economic development. So it's not just about that fairness issue. It's also, by the way, not as important as they are, not just about airplanes. Their most profitable line lately, and one where I see huge growth, is in manufacturing mouthpieces for high-end saxophones. They're now milling those particular things, doing a great job. Well, I just want to end on a positive note, too. I remain very encouraged about the future. Western's going to flourish regardless. I have no concerns about that. We're clear about the direction, what to protect. We have a fabulous university, the legacy of all that President Emeritus Morris contributed, deeply appreciative of that. We have fine morale on campus. I was just at a pancake flipping for our facilities people, and they're having come through these hard times. You wouldn't believe the spirit there. We really work very carefully and closely with them and understanding their needs and issues. Our faculty union was a big ally and advocate and part of our effectiveness recently down in Olympia. They've been a positive force on our campus as well. But I do, when it comes to the state of Washington, what I saw emerge, again, a personal note, for 30 years in Oregon, I watched Washington succeed where Oregon failed. And it seemed to me there's a state that gets the connection between investing in its people and well-being of everybody, economically, certainly, but also culturally, socially. Oregon never got that, still doesn't. That's a whole nother story. But my greatest shock when I got to Olympia was that's not what I heard in the halls of the Capitol. I heard you're arrogant, you're unconnected, the people who elect me don't care about you, they don't see you have any connection to the futures of their sons and daughters. That has turned around remarkably this last time. Representative Linton fought long and hard, and there's a whole emerging group of legislators out there who are saying, we get this connection. In fact, Chris told me, don't pull any punches in telling this audience about what it's like there. I hope I didn't pull any punches, Chris, on that. But she's among a group of leaders that weren't there, that I didn't see there when I first got there. Kelly was there. Kelly was fighting hard for us, but you were fighting a lonely battle in your caucus. And but that is very positive for the future. I see the Washington I remember down there. Well, I'm going to end on that. I probably went too long. I do look forward to your questions, your comments, your ideas, outrage denunciations, and again, do take me outside of my zone of comfort, please.
Thank you very much, Bruce. We will have questions now, and you know our basic rule is that members, name tag people, get to ask questions first and other guests afterwards if there's time. And the key point is questions. Now, Bruce is saying maybe he wants a little background on your question, but we want questions, not speeches. So we have Chuck Foster and Skip Williams around the room, and while you're getting your question ready, I'm going to start off with something you alluded to, Bruce, and that is the problem of not wanting students to be 6 years before they get a degree. So a question is, how is the university trying to meet that challenge of getting the classes that people need so that they can help you solve some of the economic issues by getting out quicker, maybe 4 years if possible?
Thank you, Don. That's, of course, something we worry a lot about, and we're never satisfied with the numbers, although, as I indicated, on any comparison to the rest of higher ed, Western is leading the pack. We're right up there with the UW in the state in terms of graduation rates and time to degree. The challenges are multiple. The challenges faced by our students is tuition goes up, and they have to go work for a quarter to earn money for tuition. That's one reason why it takes longer. And the problem there is sometimes they then they get a car or a mortgage payment or who knows what and don't come back too. So there's a loss there as well. What we're doing is multiple things in this effort to reinvest that I mentioned. We are identifying. It's one of the things we picked up in the 100 conversations. Believe it or not, we did not have good indicators of where the bottlenecks were on our campus. We've now solved that. We've now got the data systems there to understand that. But in every session we had where parents were involved, they would tell us something like, "We love your campus. Our students are having a fabulous education there, but we're worried it's going to take them an extra year to graduate." So we went back and looked at what was happening, and we have made the reallocations to hit the basic biology classes and chemistry classes that are needed to move on to other programs. We've done a lot more than that, though. Our faculty have looked at every department in the university, at every course requirement, and everything we're doing. We tend to, we hire outstanding faculty who are brilliant in their areas, and I did this, and I can say it as having been a faculty member. We build curricula we are no longer capable of staffing. So we took a very strong look. Instead of having pick 2 of these 4 courses, pick 2 of these 3 courses, or pick these 2 courses, and do those. Well, that really one of the highest priorities to fit into degree programs. So we've made those sorts of choices all through the curriculum. We have reallocated dollars to need-based financial aid in order to help our students as well in the year coming up with that financial impact of having to work. It's terribly important because when we do the calculations, I don't have them in front of me, but I've used them for the legislative testimony before. When you figure it costs on average, when you count everything, haircuts and food and room and board and tuition's $6,000, but the total cost is about $18,000 now to spend a year at Western. And you figure just one more quarter, the time goes up. You multiply that by then 1/3 of that. Then you multiply that by 15,000 students, which is what we have, and you get up into the $50 million range as to what the costs of a quarter delay is from, say, a $10 million cut in our budget, something like that. So we're really trying to do everything we can to keep those numbers down. Other questions you might have?
We have a question here.
Early in your talk, you made a comment which at least led me to believe that you had some comments to make about how we tax ourselves to fulfill some of our obligations to the future and to the present. If you'd expand on that, please.
Sure, and again, as a poli-sci person and as a public employee, I can share the facts with you. I can't advocate a partisan position. I violate the law if I do. So I've got to walk that particular line. I trust you understand. But the facts are, well, let me summarize what I said earlier. As a state, the percentage of your and my income going to the state has not changed over the last 12 to 14 years. In fact, it's declined in recent years. So this view that somehow we are being overtaxed, at least at the state and local level for that matter, is an incorrect perception. We have a revenue system that's based for an economy that no longer exists. Sales taxes made sense when it was goods being exchanged in a physical place. Well, neither happens much anymore. I mean, it's all lots of stuff over the internet, but also it's services where an awful lot of the transactions are taking place, not goods. And so that's another reason why we have this particular predicament. So our state, when it comes to revenues, is got a system that's antiquated. It doesn't respond to the world as we know it today. You could hypothetically think of one that doesn't mean taking more money out of our pockets, but still is responding to the economy as we know today. Or, I think we do have to then. Well, I'm getting close to advocacy, so I'm just going to stop there.
Else.
That's your job, that advocacy.
Oh, okay. Over here. Coming at you. Yes, you.
You've just referred to these, to this whole area of students forgotten what I was going to say, Skip. You've just referred to this whole area of students and the kinds of things that they're going to need to be able to give back to the community. I think what students need to know is that there are these issues about taxes so that they might vote a little more appropriately than most of us are voting these days on tax issues. And they also need, I think, some examples, instructions, I don't know where you go, in how to communicate with one another so that we don't have the kinds of deadlock, not only in Congress, but within our own community when we really wish to speak to solving issues. Is there a place for that in the university?
Those strike at the core of what a university ought to aspire to do. I mean, that's all very exciting to hear. When it comes to the educations our students have, we really do emphasize a lot of hands-on experience. And I think our students do get a pretty good education, but I know what you're saying. Without picking sides here, when I look at sometimes what I see happening on the national stage, and I think these are the products of my industry, higher education, I sometimes wonder about that. How are we preparing people? I think it really comes to what you're talking about, what this group is about. How do we engage in civic and constructive dialogue? Our faculty have taken that on. One of our trustees is Ralph Monroe, a name you may recognize from his long history of service, and he was really a person who, as I understand the history, was about civic engagement and not the highly partisan cliche, analyze every problem at the level of the cliche sort of approach. And he challenged us to do the same. And we have faculty working on how we can help engage our local community in discussion and civil discussion of major issues in our community. I think that's a very important role for a university to play, and one that certainly happens on our campus. I have been really impressed. You know, one of the roles of a university president is you have the opportunity to talk with passionate students about issues of great concern to them because they demand to be in the president's office and may decide to sit in there whether they have been invited in or not. But we have the very best students, and I always sort of look them in the eye and say, well, first I want to thank you for your passion. You care about something, and that's great. But they sit down and talk and understand. They really are very good that way. And so I think that promises well for the future. How do we that is just a characteristic of Western students. But it is something, as a political scientist, I worry about the polarization of our politics nationally. So I think we're making some strides at Western. We certainly are here in Bellingham in an organization like this. But it's just, we're teaching a parade. It's never going to end. We're going to have to keep re-expressing those commitments.
I know that the students at Western have been involved in voter registration. And on a whole, they do a good job because I've been up there with Sam Reed and the students take an active part. But is there some way that you could make it easier for students to register to vote online? I think they get it in their packet, but maybe some reminders from the university that you could go online and you can, if you're a Washington State resident and have a driver's license, you can just do it all online, and if you don't, then you can just download the form and send it in. So it's very, very easy to register in Washington State, but a little more help from the university would be appreciated.
Absolutely. We'll take that right back, and we have actually folks in the audience who help in that area in preparing our incoming students, and we'll make sure. I know they do get from our associated students a lot of information on how to participate and register. I've asked if it's possible to get a voting
someone from the other
an opportunity
side
for where we have in-person voting to actually be able to do that on campus also, and that's for those elections that where it's not by mail, but that I guess that's no longer even a concern on our campus. But we'll take that back. Thank you for the suggestion. Thank you very much. That's great. That's good.
We have a question here.
Hi.
Hi, thank you for coming.
You bet.
The biggest question I have is, as I go about in our city and even as I travel abroad, but especially here, and I talk to the 20-somethings and the college students, I find the critical thinking skills are lacking. And because of that, and because of social media and the instancy of information, one information that you get, whether it be true or way out there mythologically speaking, they seem to glom onto it. What is the university doing to help our young people to really have those critical thinking skills that is really needed to be competitive in a global world?
Again, I'd welcome your thoughts on that too, because it's certainly a question that we grapple with all the time, and have for probably about a decade now. And it's interesting because we've always said higher education is about teaching those critical thinking skills. And what did I do as a professor when I left graduate school 30 years ago? I committed on my students all the sins that were committed on me. I thought of them as empty vessels that needed to be filled with my knowledge. Which is not how you educate somebody. It's not how you develop critical thinking skills. And then with the internet, we no longer are the owner of that pathway to the knowledge. And so we're really being tested to find the means by which we develop those critical thinking skills on the parts. But that's really the core of what we've always said we're about as an institution of higher education, and now becomes even more obvious. Now, I would welcome, you might invite a panel of our faculty. They're doing fabulous things along this line. I can't speak to it other than I've heard their presentations and involving students and using social media in very, very creative ways in their classes, but to do it in ways that develop their critical thinking in all sorts of fascinating ways. It is not the university of our that we were at all in the way these things are being done. And I find, yeah, the freshmen come in and boy, I was telling you, we're an educational institution. Let's wait and watch what develops. But I think, as you see, at least as I see, as the students I work with, we do have a practice of engaging students, Cindy and I in our home in a lot of different ways. These are really sharp, and I'm not worried about their critical thinking skills. Now, it's a pretty low bar I'm measuring against when I look at some of what we now passes as broadcast news and things like that as to the kind of critical thinking skills we're looking for. But these are really good students. Still, I'm not denying this remains a central challenge for all of higher education. Can we really deliver on what we've said higher education is always about? And that's something we're constantly working on.
Okay, question over here.
I'm a member of the Sputnik generation. I look around the room and I think other people remember that as well. Most of my high school graduate classmates went into the sciences. That was in the mid-60s. Today, I see, after working in higher ed for 32 years, that business has become the driving force. How do you make money? We have issues here in Whatcom County, we have issues here in the state that are so fundamentally connected to people's understanding of science and appreciation of how clear cutting isn't going to help the lake, or how coal trains aren't going to perhaps do the best things for our community and aren't going to be the reason that people work and live here. How can the university help to inform and appreciate and spread more information about good science in the fact that there has been a gap in people's education?
I'm smiling because for 30 years I taught environmental policy and worked for the Forest Service and really worked with a lot of scientists on environmental policy issues. And there is a practice I call brick in a toilet bowl environmentalism. Back a long time ago, I remember in the movie, put a brick in your toilet bowl to save water. If you actually thought about the science of it, back then the drain was about 3 inches above the bottom of the tank, so that brick didn't change the volume of water that was used at all. And there's an easier way to do it, adjust the float. And the brick is probably going to, with the sand, and gum up the works anyway. So all it was achieved is you felt better about doing it. That's brick in a toilet bowl environmentalism. And there is too much of that around. It relates to the earlier question. It's all, and I mean, it is really understanding the science of these issues, as well as the policy and the social aspects of these issues. And I think it's good news on our campus. The areas that are growing most rapidly are the science-based curricula at Western. We're known for strong programs in other areas, but that's where students are being drawn to. And we have, internationally recognized places like the Huxley College of the Environment, which brings together science and policy in really meaningful, hands-on ways. I do have to tell a story. When I first got here, Mark Emmert announced they were starting the first College of the Environment down at the UW, and I called him and said, glad to hear that. We've got one for 40 years. If you need any help, we'll tell you how to go about it. But the other thoughts I'd add, for what they're worth, and this isn't directly what you're asking about, is we turn out students superbly trained to work with advanced composites and designing airplane wings, and students who are fine software engineers. And it turns out our two the firms that employ more of our graduates than anybody else are Boeing and Microsoft, and they get in line to hire our graduates. They really love them. Most of those graduates come from the College of Humanities and Sciences or the College of Business and Economics. These are complex organizations that require a wide range of skills and abilities to run from their worldwide enterprises with the global understanding that requires. So I want to keep in mind the broad liberal arts-based education has great value as well. We are, I think, in one of the pieces of research we did, the last university in this state to still require a lab science of all of our students, for example. That's one commitment that still stands at Western, and we're proud of it. Other questions, folks?
We have one more.
Right here.
Thank you for your remarks, Dr. Shepard. I've been reading Robert Kiyosaki's book about the conspiracy of the rich, and his dad, I guess, was the chancellor of the state of Hawaii's education. He said traditionally higher education institutions have trained good employees to go in the corporate, but we're seeing a huge shift. In fact, Bellingham hosted the Bali National Conference, a business alliance for local living economies, and we're a leader in sustainable connections, things like that. How is Western preparing young entrepreneurs and focusing on perhaps the hope for the future, local living economies rather than corporate mega companies taking over the world kind of thing?
It really is. Again, we were very proud to be partners in hosting Bali 2 here. We were proud to help make that happen. I suppose and I've heard those arguments, and when I see our students, it doesn't fit the model of we're just turning out cogs in a machine to make the corporations richer, and our students would laugh you right out of the room if you said that's why they're at Western. That's not at all. They really, this phrase, lead a purposed life, is what our students are about. And so our challenge is not how do we get our students there, how do we make sure we're staying ahead of them and providing the opportunities they want to be engaged in things like that program in our schools where we have thousands of students in the schools to serve the toughest schools. How do we involve them and make sure we have opportunities, and I hear this from the community too, to engage our students in internship opportunities and hands-on real-world learning sorts of things. I guess I'll end with an anecdote of why I think we start from, this is perhaps a problem at other institutions more than a Western, but I was back in D.C. and we've got, I think 20 sort of Western alumni mafia working up on the Hill, and we meet with them regularly, and it's a whole different age group. I mean, I'm used to alumni functions with white tablecloths. No, they want to meet at the Cock and Bull. Was that the name of it, Sherry? It's just across the Bull and something or other for beer and pizza. And we have a graduate who's worked for several years in Senator Murray's office, and his wife who also works on the Hill. And he was telling the story. They were going into the Peace Corps to work in Romania. And he said the senator called him into her office, and said, you really don't understand the way the game is played here. You work in my office for 3 years, you get your ticket punched, you go to a prestige law firm, and you cash it in, and you then make lots of money. I shouldn't put it that way, Senator Murray, but that was the sort of the message as he was relaying it to me. And he said, no, we're going into the Peace Corps. That's what we're doing. And in fact, we're very proud of the fact that Western now ranks 3rd in the nation among mid-sized universities in the number of alumni we have in the Peace Corps, and I could give you a ton more statistics like that. So I think while it's a very genuine concern about how, I think I have oversold universities as sort of an engine of economic development when it's really a much broader contribution higher ed has to the quality and character of our society. Thank you very much.
One more.
Oh, okay.
President Shepard, what a treat to have you here, and thank you, Skip. And but you kind of addressed my question, so I'll be really, really quick. In a world where on the Huffington Post this morning we discovered that one of the more colorful candidates for president doesn't believe in evolution, where the Kim Kardashian's wedding video has been released, where my drunk kitchen hostess can make $100,000 a year on YouTube, how do you emphasize with kids? I mean, because they're kids that, you know, the future's kind of serious. It isn't just a game, and I don't envy you in this world where so many of the messages are nuts.
Yeah.
So, what's your question?
Yeah, you know, I am not here to offer social criticism, but you know, we all share these concerns, and I suppose, you know, I put it in the context of how do I see our politics evolving into not just being ideological, and our politics has always been, but analyzing everything at the level of the cliche instead of digging deeper. When you get into the detail, you have to get into the detail to make good public policy. And I can tell you, I saw that happen this time down in Olympia. Let me return to that point. Our legislators wanted to understand the nuances. They knew they were going to have to take some tough votes. I didn't see 3 years ago his willingness to avoid those tough votes, or the willingness to take them. So I think we're moving in the right direction down in Olympia. I think that, again, what you're doing, and I ask you to ask questions that take me outside of my comfort zone. And by asking about critical thinking, by asking about the questions, you're really asking us to deliver on what we say higher education is about. You know, I make a couple of comments at commencement. We just had a wonderful commencement Saturday, but one of the things that we emphasized there, but I'm preaching to the choir because our students already believe it, it's not higher education unless it's put to truly higher purposes. And I think that does characterize Western to a very large degree. Thank you very much.
Bruce. Thank you very much, Bruce. And I did call him Bruce because the first time I met him, he says, it's Bruce. So anyway, but we want to thank you for coming and for sharing with us. And we want to give you a copy of Whatcom Places too. So when you get a little time off, you can sneak out to a really nice place.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again. Okay. And thank you all. I should really clarify what I was saying at the beginning for our September meetings. Again, county executive finalists, Jack Lowes, Doug Erickson. And then I should clarify for the mayor's race, I couldn't say anything final because Mayor Pike is currently on vacation. We haven't been able to reach his campaign staff for him as of yet over the last 4 or 5 days. But we're sure he will be there in October. And Kelly Linville is here. She also has said she will be here in October. So that clarifies September and October. And again, thank you so much for coming, and see you again next month. Bye now.